Hello and welcome to the Gifted Ed podcast. I am your host, Meghan McCarthy, clinical social worker. We're grateful for the opportunity to share this space with you today as we talk about the complexities of giftedness. Today, we welcome Christina Fallstick and Katie Baldwin to discuss ways to build rapport with our students and embrace classroom connections. Christina is an experienced educator and currently in her 14th year as a middle school math teacher. She encompasses a broad range of expertise, including working with students with learning differences and twice exceptional learners.
I think as teachers, we often get so caught up in our emails, grading, conversations with other teachers that when kids come in the morning or before a class, take the time to talk to them, ask them about their weekend, ask them about the plans after school. You can really learn interesting things from the kids, so we have to remember that they're people too.
Additionally, she holds a certification in art education with a specialization in photography and has earned a STEM endorsement. Katie's been teaching for 13 years and is currently teaching third grade. She has a master's degree in technology and education.
If you were going to walk into the school and everyone was teaching the exact same lesson and had the same materials, would you choose your classroom to go into based on your demeanor and your excitement for the subject?
Recently, Katie received grant funding to attend professional development on student engagement at the Ron Clark Academy in Georgia. Katie's passion is engaging her students through building close relationships with them and their families. Welcome to the Gifted Ed podcast, Katie and Christina.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
I was very excited to have a math teacher, particularly when we're talking about student engagement, because I don't know if you guys get the best reputation for focusing on SEL and in rapport, when I think that's at like the core of how you engage in your classroom, which we'll later talk about. But I was very excited to have middle school math because I feel like that's a fascinating perspective to have in this conversation. So while most articles and books, etc., stress the importance of building rapport with students right in the beginning of the year, we all know that even our best intentions get derailed and that the art of building and strengthening relationships is an ongoing endeavor. So I thought it'd be helpful to explore this topic now as we are in our second trimester and it's never too late to take a step back and kind of just reassess how we want our classroom to feel, how we want to engage with our students, and how we want students to engage with each other and with the curriculum. So with that said, Katie, what are some classroom-wide values that you strive to create with your students in your classroom?
I would say I have 3 priorities in my classroom. The first thing I strive to do is create a classroom climate of safety. So to do this, I really make it clear I value them taking risks and trying, not necessarily getting the correct answer. I love when I see my students participate and collaborate and help one another as they're learning and growing. I'd say the second thing that is important to me is I really work hard to build personal connections with each of my students. I think that students who feel seen are more likely to engage in my classroom activities. So I really try to find ways to connect with them by chatting about books that they enjoy or their hobbies outside of school, and just by listening to them when they want to share something with me, which sometimes is more important than what I was planning to teach in that moment.
Yes, but sometimes like the hardest thing to make time for.
Yes.
Right? As a parent or a teacher, because it's usually their sharing time is like the least convenient for your schedule, I feel like, but probably the most important to like make it, especially in the beginning.
Exactly. Well, and sometimes they won't be able to, move on and focus on what we need to do unless they share how their braces are making them feel that they just got over the weekend or something that happened with a pet at home. So making that time for them, I think, pays off in the long run.
And I'm sure I'm thinking too, the middle school schedule where you have passing periods, right? And like kids are, the bell rings, you have to go to the next class. And I'm sure that you have the ones that like take forever to pack up.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're looking to connect.
Yep, they are looking to connect. And I'll talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah.
And then I would say that the third thing that's really important to me is to figure out which each of my students are passionate about. So I always have some students who might love to write, and so they want to share their writing with the class or enter a writing contest or One year I had a little boy who started a club about composers at recess and just wanted to be able to put up posters, and they'd walk around the playground talking about famous composers. But I feel like if they're able to showcase their talents and their interests, then that helps them be engaged in the classroom.
That's valued.
Yeah. And we know they're all asynchronous learners. So there's going to be some areas where they struggle. And so if you can really let them shine in their the things that they love, then I think that is helpful.
And I think regardless of their age, that is something that's so important. You can have a kindergartner, you can have a senior in high school, and just knowing their interests and developing that close relationship from the beginning is so important. And it doesn't matter the age group or the level that they're at.
Yeah. In a previous episode, we discussed the book, The Whole Brain Child by Dr. Daniel Siegel and Dr. Tina Payne Bryson. The book outlines the following social emotional pillars that are essential in fostering healthy relationships with children. And some of them we've already discussed. So it's nice just to kind of validate that these 4 are really just core parts to our classroom. And they're the 4 S's. So seen, safe, soothed, and secure. And to be seen, not just with our eyes, but really having a respect of their perceptions of their relationships and of themselves. Even if we don't agree with them off the bat, just really making that time for them to be seen is the biggest piece. And not using time to kind of change their mind, but really understanding where they're coming from. Safe, really just making that environment that reinforces physical and emotional safety. Soothed, where we offer strategies to support them as they deal with difficult emotions and situations. And then last would be secure, where we help them develop an internalized sense of well-being. So Christina, I was interested just kind of what are some strategies that you embed in your classroom routines or structures that align with some of those 4 S's?
Yeah, sure. I'm actually going to first start with a little story as to why I am in the position that I'm in. So whenever I discuss my job, a lot of people ask me, what do you teach? And the moment that I say middle school math, it's as if they've seen a ghost. I think we can all agree that those years are extremely awkward. They can be very challenging and hard to forget. But that's exactly why I love teaching math and this age group specifically. I think building confidence in math is really important, and middle school can be tough. And I want to be that teacher who helps the students discover the beauty of math and also the beauty in themselves. So the beginning of the year, the first thing that I establish is building that sense of safety. I really do think that when students feel safe in a classroom, all of those other essentials naturally fall into place. There's 3 strategies that I use so that kids feel safe. The first one is creating just a physically comfortable environment. I do think that kids want to come into a welcoming space, and when they do so, they feel at ease, and I think they're more likely to be themselves. The second one is acknowledging the students. I think as teachers, we often get so caught up in our emails, grading, conversations with other teachers that when kids come in the morning or before a class, take the time to talk to them, ask them about their weekend, ask them about the plans after school. You can really learn interesting things from the kids, and we have to remember that they're people too. Another thing that I do is at the beginning of the school year, and this is something you can also do mid-year, I tend to call them climate surveys, is ask the kids questions that not only gauge, how they feel about math, but ask them about their identity, ask them about their hobbies, ask them about their passions so that you can start to understand them better and they're comfortable telling you. And that really kind of opens the world to how you can teach things and what specifically you can teach. And as far as the other S's, there's 3 main strategies that I focus on. The first one is being approachable and accessible. I do think it's important for us as teachers, especially for math, to have an open door policy. You really want kids to approach you with questions and concerns and know that you're always there and willing to help them. And it's important for us as teachers to be consistent and reliable as well. And that's both interactions with the kids and also our reactions so that they really feel secure in your classroom. The second one is using humor and warmth. While that's not as tangible, I do think it's important to find ways to use humor because it really does break down those walls in the classroom, especially for our nice, awkward middle school kids. Humor is always really important. And some examples of that is I'll use the kids' names in the word problems. They'll find that a little bit more interesting. Here in my notes, I have the word Jason capitalized, we were doing a couple application problems, and for whatever reason, the word Jason or the name Jason kept coming up, and the kids were like, why is Jason in math today? Well, on the next quiz, I used Jason all over the quiz, and the kids kept giggling. So now it's this little inside joke that we have, but it really kind of broke down those walls.
And just add some, during a math
Laughter,
test, like the tension.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah, I actually had a student once who would get very, very nervous during math tests. And so I used that name in a word problem. And all of a sudden, he was completely willing to take the entire test without a problem. So I think there's something to that.
Yeah. And, humor can come in different ways when appropriate. But regardless of the age, they'll still giggle, even if it's not as funny.
I think it's so interesting that you used humor and not sarcasm. Right? Yeah. Because that is such a tricky art.
There's a lot of layers to being funny, right? And I think sarcasm can be challenging because not all students, especially at a younger age or an older age, understand sarcasm. So you want to be careful with that line. Yeah. But find things that are light and airy. Yeah. Like I said, having these little inside jokes as a class. Yes. Or, I in the morning always have a joke of the day on the board. And I think a lot of the humor also just comes natural. You'll be in certain situations as a teacher that are funny, and you just kind of have to embrace it at that moment.
I would say, I think rule of thumb is when it's like a whole class conversation, just err on the side of caution, and sarcasm is just not, because it's not going to land and you're not going to be able to check in with each kid. But humor for sure. And I think it might not be funny to all, but like they see that you're
laughing. You're trying.
Yes.
They want to see a teacher who can laugh at themselves, I guess, too.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And sharing, along with that, sharing those personalized stories, I think also kind of helps to humanize us a little bit. And that's either in relatable stories or their challenges. I think it's important for the kids to know that we are also real people too.
Yeah.
And the last one is a big one. Be enthusiastic and passionate about what you're doing. Show your excitement for learning. I think we can all agree as teachers that enthusiasm is contagious. When students see that you're passionate about what you're teaching, I really feel like they're more likely to engage and feel part of that process. And, I really think, especially in math, making it clear that you believe in their ability to succeed and to grow. This can be incredibly impactful, especially, for those students who do lack that confidence.
Yeah, when I was at the Ron Clark Academy last year, he actually mentioned that, saying, like, if you were going to walk into the school and everyone was teaching the exact same lesson and had the same materials, would you choose your classroom to go into based on your demeanor and your excitement for the subject?
That's a good way to look at it.
It's good, and I would say maybe not always. Yeah.
Well, and it's important.
But that's something I strive for. Sure.
And it's important sometimes for us to kind of step back and put ourselves in that position and, really look and see, like, how are these kids feeling when they're entering in this space?
Yeah, and I think that over the summer, my students aren't going to remember the perfect reading lesson that I taught them, but they will remember if they had a positive experience in my classroom and felt like I saw them.
Yeah. And I feel like the confidence that they get from those memories is what will propel them into the next school year.
Exactly.
Maybe way far more so than any skills that were taken from class to class.
There's a quote that I always think about, and I know I'm going to butcher this, but it's something along the lines of kids don't need a perfect teacher, they need a happy teacher, because we are only human, and as perfect as we might want to be, again, you have to kind of step back and think that kids need a teacher that they can feel comfortable with, that they can feel safe with and secure with.
Yep. And
just being a happy teacher and being there for them, all the other stuff doesn't necessarily matter.
Yeah. And I do feel like sometimes sometimes we're always the adults. So sometimes we just have to put that mask on and get through really bad days. But I do think there's power too in just being like, hey guys, I'm having a rough day.
Yeah.
Right.
Being open.
That happy doesn't mean Pollyanna cheerleader, right? If that's not your go-to persona. But sometimes even just like being real with them, they are there then for you, just like you are there for them. And then you are happier.
They do respond really well to that.
Yeah.
When, again, we're also, just like them, we have other things outside of school. And if I'm having that kind of day, I'm very open about it. And they do respond well to that.
Yeah.
Because when it's them, they understand and appreciate that respect back.
Yeah. And kind of just thinking back, Katie, you had said something about risk taking, and then Christina, your focus on safety. And I think those two have to go hand in hand, that we can't just expect kids to take risks, especially with our gifted population and the tendency towards perfectionism and really being scared of getting anything wrong. And I know in a previous episode we talked about, which was such a fascinating take on risk taking, is having students, and maybe you guys have already done this, kind of scale out what is a risk to them, which is just a fascinating way to understand like where they're coming from in terms of why won't the student ever raise their hand? And if they see that as like the biggest risk they could ever take that day, you're like, okay, well that puts it into perspective. But I think that idea of hoping kids take risks without showing them that there's a net in case it doesn't go well, because it's not going to every time, is just hard. So I think that's just such an important piece that you guys highlighted so well in your classrooms. So I'm kind of curious, just like, how does this level of rapport impact students' ability to engage in the curriculum?
Well, I do feel like when kids are understood, when they feel supported, when they feel connected to the teacher, they're more likely to participate actively, which then I feel like from there, they tend to ask more questions. They tend to seek that help when needed. So with that, I feel like they're more likely to succeed.
Yeah.
I would say if you establish a solid rapport with a student, then they, you've earned their trust.
Yeah.
And so they know they can come to you if they have a question. They know, they aren't going to get made fun of if they take a risk and it doesn't go well. So I think that trust and that rapport is key.
Yeah. I remember working with a student a few years ago, and the student would constantly, like in one particular class, take the risk, if you will, and like answering the harder questions, and then other classes was like not even pen to paper attempting, and really trying to divide, like, what is it, like deep dive, like what is it about? And it was like, I know it's going to be okay if I get it wrong.
Yeah.
Like the teacher, that they had that rapport, and it's like, that is,
well, they're more motivated.
Powerful
I think
tool,
because they're more
course.
Motivated to do well, and because you've created that secure and safe place, it also boosts their confidence along with that motivation.
Yeah. You have a spot. Like your desk isn't changing if you get it wrong, get it right. This is where you are.
Right.
This is your space.
I think that taking those risks then helps them to embrace those mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. And then how does the rapport building impact your ability to cater the curriculum to meet the needs of each student?
Yeah, I think that, again, when students feel comfortable in your classroom and just with you, you can create lessons that resonate with them a little bit more because you understand where they're coming from. So I feel like they're, more likely to succeed and, meet those curriculum needs.
Yeah, I would say knowing your students, then you're able to plan lessons that will reach them better. So last year I had a class that loved acting things out, and they were so into what might possibly have caused the Chicago fire. So we ended up doing a mock trial where they put the O'Leary cow on trial, and it just was so meaningful to them. But I knew it would work because I had so many kids who loved, getting up and acting things out. But you need to know your students to be able to do that.
Even with like learning styles, there's a couple groups of students that I have more towards the end of the day.
Yeah.
And by the end of the day, these kids are exhausted. They're, have a lot of energy and cannot sit through a 45-minute class. So, I will take the time to be creative and come up with these activities that get them up and moving, that get them to collaborate. And really those activities are, I'd say, the most successful that I have.
Thank you both so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I feel like sometimes these seem like such big topics and so complex. And it always just kind of comes back to seeing your students, valuing who they are, how they like to learn, and just embedding that as much as possible and valuing that.
And I think the reason we are teachers, and this is something we have to remember, is because we truly do care about them.
Yeah.
We love every single one of our students. We'll be up at night sometimes thinking about them in the middle of the night, but you know, we care about them so much. And I think you have to step back sometimes and remember that and find that time to learn about your kids.
Yeah. So to end our episode, we want to leave you with a reflection question. How has today's conversation influenced your view of how building rapport impacts student engagement? And something to try is, given our conversation today, what is one strategy that you will implement in your classroom that supports your students feeling seen, safe, soothed, and or secure? We want to thank you for joining us in this space today. Please subscribe to the Gifted Ed podcast to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Stay tuned for our next episode that continues to unpack the complexities of giftedness.